Friends, well, that's working, yeah. Friends, we are gathered here today to honor the long, extraordinary, and triumphant life of Bob Sanford. May his memory be a blessing. We are also here to comfort his family, his wife Barry, his children and their families, Desiree and Aryeh. Online, hello to Rebecca, Rafi, Judah, Lior, and Roi, Chantel and Alex, Benji and Maya, Jonathan and Stephanie, Mark and Carmiela, and Carmiela, Sammy and Camila, Brigitte and Tom, Ariel, Ian, Aaliyah and Brooks. Hello online to Gabrielle and Julia and Nicholas, and to all the other aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. And it's even more complicated for children of a Holocaust survivor. The cantor will honor Bob by chanting Psalm 121, linking his life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. As Cantor Sarah chants, allow your attention to be drawn to the tone and the timbre of the psalm. The psalm is chosen for its final line. May God guard your going and your coming. May the divine presence that accompanied Bob into this world now escort him into the world to come.
Shir lamalot esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz Al yitin lamot raglecha Al yanum shomrecha Hine lo yanum velo yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilecha, al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmerecha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam.
To begin the process of sharing stories and memories, Brigitte, will you come forward? Just adjust this.
when someone lives to be 97, you don't just lose a father, you lose a library, a witness to history. For those who knew my father, you know he loved to share his stories. Give him a microphone, and you are guaranteed to hear some dramatic story or a long piece of advice. My parents were married for 77 years and together over 80. That's not a marriage, that's an institution. Their relationship often reminded me of Everybody Loves Raymond or sometimes The Seinfeld Show. Constant bickering, absolute devotion. Like intense jalapenos followed by a shot of tequila. As they always said, we're Romanian, and that's how Romanians are. And somehow it worked. My dad could be intimidating. At about 5'5", he was what I like to call Napoleon threatening. When he walked into a room, everyone paid attention, especially his kids, grandkids, and our friends. Some were intimidated, yet they always came back, and as adults, they truly loved him. Because beneath that intensity was a man who loved his children deeply, even if he never quite understood American teenagers. He came from a different time in Europe, one shaped by fear and persecution, but from it he learned resilience, and that is what he taught me. My dad had the mind of a great scientist and inventor, a chemist, an entrepreneur, and a teacher. He developed the first electronic thermometer, helped develop stealth aircraft technology, and worked on the Gemini space program that sent men to the moon, yet fainted at the sight of blood. He loved science, and that passion bonded him with my son, Nicholas. They talked about the cosmos and Scientific American articles from a very young age. Though my father never became a doctor himself, one of his proudest moments was knowing Nicholas was in medical school. One of their last conversations ended with Nick saying, "I'm doing this because of you." The smile on my dad's face said everything. My father survived the Holocaust. He endured the Botoshan ghettos and unimaginable loss, but he refused to let suffering define him. He told his stories not for sympathy, but to teach, to warn, and he passed that responsibility on to me. He met my mother when he was 15 and she was 13. He was her math tutor. He was brilliant, relentless, and completely in love. For over 80 years, through war, immigration, hardship, laughter, and arguments, they chose each other every single day. My father loved my siblings, Desiree, and Mark, and me, and I should say, I'm an English teacher. He loved each of us grandchildren, Rebecca, Chantal, Jonathan, Ariel, Gab, Nick, Sammy, and Camilla. And he found great joy from all of his great-grandchildren. My father was definitely not perfect. He was stubborn, and he could be scary. He was complicated, but he was also brave. He was brilliant, he was loyal, he was funny and deeply human. He lived through horror, and still chose hope. For me, he is the reason I keep fighting. When things feel impossible, I think of a man who survived genocide, crossed continents, reinvented himself again and again, and never stopped moving forward. If he could do that, so can I. Dad, you are complicated, you are extraordinary, and you are ours. May your memory be a blessing and a source of strength, courage, and resilience for all of us who carry you forward. And before I end, I just want to say a very special thank you to Sherry's Angels, because without you, we could have never lived the lives that we lived and continued day after day. So to Letty, Melissa, Estelle, Sherry, and all the rest for your care and compassion and help Thank you to Rabbi Danny from Brookline and Juber. Thank you for Carol from the Holocaust Fund, who helped us to be able to have Sherry's Angels when we needed them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. Is joining us from, I think, Las Cruces, New Mexico. All right, Nick, why don't you just say hello, and if we can hear you, we'll say hello back, okay?
Hi, can you hear me?
Can everybody hear him?
We can hear you okay.
All right. I just wrote a short little bit for Grandpa. So if I can start, I'll just go. All right. So Grandpa is my inspiration and a source of continued strength and joy in many of our lives in one way or another. And he was a well-respected member of his community. The two most important things that Grandpa taught me are that everything is connected and that true success is found in the learning of language. We all joked that Grandpa was a great orator of his time and that he saw himself that way, but it's also true that he spoke many languages and had much to say. Grandpa taught me that modern languages like English were similar to math, and that this was just another language that described the world using physical laws. And it was through that I learned to really open the way I looked at the world in general. He also believed that language, like people, was something that constantly evolved, adding new words and symbols for new discoveries and reflecting each country, even if he couldn't say it. He once told me that the greatest success and privilege in his life is extreme circumstances.
Bob Sanford was born on August 11th, 1928. He grew up in Botoșani, Romania. If anything I say is incorrect, you can blame me and rely on your own facts. I've received those over these anecdotes over the recent years, and they may be contradicted by other known information, so please forgive me. From my experience with Bob, the two values that he emphasized most in our conversations were intellect and family. There's a quote by the rabbi and scholar Avraham Geiger: "Talent may be acquired by laborious application. Genius is a gift of grace, which can never be acquired if it be not in man. Talent cannot overcome impediments of overwhelming force. Genius conquers the severest reverses." Bob admired genius. It was perhaps his greatest compliment of people. He strove for genius himself and was a genius. He was proud to have finished as the 5th student in a class of 360. In many ways, it was his intellect, his genius, that allowed him to meet his wife, Barry. I imagine he had to apply his genius when the family fled from Romania, Bob attaching himself to Barry and Barry's family. As they fled, the other adult male, I believe was an uncle, was separated, and it was Bob and Barry's mother making a dangerous escape from Romania across borders, and ultimately they made it safely to Paris. When they emigrated to America, Bob said, "After we came to the United States, God had fun with us." By that he meant, and he knew that General MacArthur needed people who could be in his office and communicate with the Allied armies, but instead he was sent to Tokyo. He served in military intelligence, according to Bob, from January 8th, 1952 to June 25th, 1953. Maybe. Professionally, Bob told me he made a promise as a Holocaust survivor not just to have children, but to do something to help all of our people. He's proud to have worked on moon flights and atomic energy. He invented the electric thermometer and appeared on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. He ran a company for 4 years and then sold it, worked in computers until he retired, and then for the next 20 years he would teach. He was addicted to learning. There was even a time when it was told, well, you have a doctorate in chemistry, why don't you teach that? Well, he hadn't taught chemistry, or perhaps even studied it in at least 50 years, maybe 60 years, so he spent the summer learning the textbooks so that he could teach chemistry. He continued teaching until he was 90, and he wrote books as well. When it comes to the other value, family, the Talmud says, in the name of Rabbi Hanalai, a man without a wife dwells without joy, without blessing, and without goodness. Barry, when Bob tells his life story, he starts his story with when he met you. When this young woman walked by with a boy, I think he knew the boy. He saw a woman with a ravishing smile as he looked down from the balcony. He later found out that she had come to the town to visit her aunt, and he knew the young boy, her cousin with whom she was walking. He called up the cousin, if I think I've had the details right. Could you tell me about the girl you were walking with? He said, she's looking for a tutor in math while she's in town. And then as Bob's thinking, that was my approach. The next you allowed Bob to join you, walking up and down the street. The very next night, he couldn't sleep. He said, I wanted to marry this girl. I knew it right away. So I got into the university in Bucharest just so I could be close to her. I got to know her stepfather. I started at the university, and ultimately I fled. I told the family that I wanted to flee with them from the communists who are now in control in Romania. I think your stepfather laughed a little bit and said, okay, let's try. And eventually Bob and Barry and the family made it to Paris. At that point, there was a choice, Barry. You could either go with your family, or I think somewhere else, or you could marry Bob and go to the United States, and you chose Bob. And that is the love story that your family tells. You got married by the chief rabbi of Paris, and it was very romantic to be in the city of light in those years. With Bob telling stories, Barry could barely get in a word. But her comment was, I took him as my tutor for his brain and his good looks. Barry and Bob had, as they put it, a true Romanian love affair. Now, if you don't have Romanian relatives, you won't know what that means, but a Romanian love affair is expressed through intense quarreling, which to an outsider might look like something is amiss in the relationship, but ultimately it was reflection of the deep love and passion, and that there was an underlying commitment that on the surface, while quarrels would persist, there was an intense love that they shared with each other, a very good marriage knowing each other for over 80 years. You lived your lives together. He knew you since junior high. You traveled the world together to China, India. What an extraordinary love affair you've had, and the fruits of your love surround you in this moment. Bob loved providing for his family. He strove to provide security and stability. He loved his work and his learning. He loved smoking a pipe until the grandchildren stole it and hid it in the backyard. He loved giving speeches, but most of all, he loved you, Barry, and he loved you, his family. The last time we spoke, he was particularly praiseworthy of some of the men that his daughters and granddaughters had brought into the family. I don't have things to share about everybody, but he said, Ian, he's a genius. Alex, he's a genius. Tom, you're a very good man. Aryeh, you're well-to-do and very smart. So I could tell that he shept a lot of nachas from his daughters and his granddaughters who brought these men into his family. He was very proud of all of you. Ariel and Gabrielle, he and Barry were there when you were young, when your mom was getting divorced. Bob and Barry, you were the stable force in your grandchildren's lives. You were always there. He provided direction for you in your life and inspired your passion for science. Desiree, Mark, each of you sit here with your spouses, your grandchildren, thanks to this brilliant man with a watermelon in his belly who fell in love with Barry and made it out of Romania. From Bob's perspective, he says, we've been privileged.
במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מסתירים את נשמת ישראל בן יוסף וצבי חיה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
El Malay Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. To the soul of Yisrael ben Yosef v'tzvi Chaya, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. Just want to Barry to share this poem called Some Wednesday with you. When will I be myself again? Some Tuesday perhaps, in the late afternoon, sitting quietly with a cup of tea and a cookie. Or Wednesday sometime later, you will stir from a nap and you will see him. You will turn to talk to him. You will hear his voice and probably argue. You will not be frightened, and you will not be sad, and you will not be alone. Not alone at all, and your tears will warm you. But not today, and not tomorrow, and not tomorrow's tomorrow, but someday, some Tuesday late in the afternoon, sitting quietly with a cup of tea and a cookie, and you will be yourself again.